Life. I am Dr. Gina. There are many on the right side of politics who think they have found a 21st century Ronald Reagan. Ben Carson has rock star style following wherever he goes, and some say he's the greatest thing to come along since the Gipper. Steve Deace's latest column is on that exact topic, and he joins me here today. Steve, welcome back to Smart Life. Good to have you.
Good to be with you, Gina. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Now, Ben Carson, I have to tell you, this is so funny, and this is the truth, Steve. This is what a fan I am of you. This morning we're prepping for the show, and they're in there showing me the different articles and whatever, and I'd read through all the articles I was going to discuss with you, and then they go, "Oh no!" I said, "What?" They said, "Deace just put out another even better article." It is the truth. You do write some great stuff, and I think that we are brain twins in a former life or something, because this is exactly what I've been arguing. My mother, for one, is very impressed with Ben Carson and wants to get on that bandwagon, and I've said, "Not so fast, Mom. I've watched politics too long. There are some major components missing." But first, Steve, I want you to start with what makes Ben Carson a good candidate, because you did write about that as well.
I think because he's really the uber candidate for this environment. He's not tainted by Washington, D.C. He is a minority. He's articulate. He has an inspirational life story. He's brilliant. He's smart. He's been successful in both the public and the private sector. He's got a Presidential Medal of Freedom. And he's also bold. I mean, he's willing to go to the View and take our worldview to the View. And frankly, that's a lot tougher audience than a presidential debate is. I mean, you are in the ideological Christian in front of the lions in that situation. He also faced down Barack Obama, man to man, face to face at the National Prayer Breakfast a couple of years ago. So I mean, he really has a lot going for him, and just the things I just mentioned are just some of those things.
Absolutely, and I agree too. Very appealing on the face of things, but the problem is that elections are so much more complicated than just who the grassroots really likes and what characteristics we'd like for this person to have. And we're going to get to that. You say, though, I love this. You point out that despite the experience of so many in Washington, D.C., when everybody's talking about experience, one of the reasons why Dr. Carson is so appealing is because we look at the record of those in Washington, D.C. Despite their experience, you say, they can't secure the border. They can't secure Iraq. They can't even secure Ferguson, Missouri, for crying out loud. They can't fix Obamacare, and they can't get the economy going. So somebody with no experience, very, very appealing. You point out also that Senator Rand Paul, you say, he's only been in office a short period of time, but nobody's really questioning his credentials. So you say, this guy running a Kentucky ophthalmology clinic 4 years ago considered qualified to be CEO of the United States. So why not Ben Carson? But then you answer your own question. I'm going to let you say, Steve Deace, why you say Ben Carson probably won't work as a realistic nominee.
Well, I think that he actually is an unbeatable nominee. If he's the nominee, the Democrats could dig up the bones of JFK, reincarnate and reanimate him. They would not win. They could not beat Ben Carson. The problem Ben Carson's going to have, Gina, is getting to the nomination. And that is understanding the on-the-ground process, who I really have to talk to. I'll just give you one example from my own home state here, the first in the nation caucus state of Iowa. We had a major event. Over 100 credentialed media were here on August the 9th. We had Rick Perry here, Bobby Jindal here, Mike Huckabee here, Ted Cruz here, a lot of other major thinkers here as sort of a presidential audition. He did not show up, but he is going to show up at a county party event here in Iowa this weekend, which is nice. But he allowed 5 guys to have free reign at 1,000 key Iowa activists that he would need to get in front of. And he gave those 5 guys a free and first shot at them. And that shows me that he needs people around him that understand the primary process, how it works. Who do I really need to talk to on the ground? I mean, he's done a great job going everywhere nationally, from CPAC to the Western Conservative Summit to major websites like Newsmax and World Net Daily. And that certainly helps, like, get your foot in the door. But if you're going to close the sale in a Republican primary, you've got to get on the ground. You need boots on the ground, and the first boots on the ground have to be you. For example, I was in a private meeting over just listening in to Ted Cruz trying to sell himself to 30 key Iowa activists on that same exact day that Ben Carson was not here. And these are the kinds of activists, if you're going to win the Iowa caucuses, you need about a third of these people on your team. And again, he's behind in that process. So it's really key that he hires people that understand the GOP primary process, not these feckless shakedown consultants who never win, a cotton pick and pay that are going to just rake his wallet over the coals, but people that have actually been involved, know who the Dr. G's are, know who the Steve Deaces are, who have real voices in the grassroots process that can help bring him the numbers of conservatives that he needs that sometimes won't even show up to party events.
Yeah, and unlike the days where others could be elected with no experience, as you point out, today's reality is just because of the primary process, you have to have run a campaign organization on the ground and won major states. Ideally, you've been a senator, correct, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, well, Vice President, we have elected people who haven't even won statewide elections. Two of our most popular presidents, Lincoln and Eisenhower, had never won a statewide election. So you can do it. It's not easy to do, but your margin for error is slim. That's why it's very important. Who are you hiring? Who's calling shots? Now, I will tell you, without mentioning names, the morning that piece ran in the Washington Times, I think about half of the 2016 Ben Carson campaign team contacted me by phone or email. So clearly they read that and they understand what it is that I'm talking about. So I think this is where you transition now from a personality to a candidate. When you're a personality, you charge $50,000 to speak somewhere. When you're a candidate, you pay them to get in front of their audience. And you have to understand that, and you have to understand who are the key audiences to get in front of, because you can't just win a nomination with television ads or on talk radio or with speaking appearances, particularly in the early states, Gina. We've never nominated someone that did not win two of the first three early states. And if we're going to have a convention this time that is in late June, early January, early July, now you're talking about the process even earlier. That means Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina are more important as well, because you've got to get early momentum in those states in a truncated process. There's not going to be time for on-the-job training as a candidate for Ben Carson. He's got to hit the ground running. Herman Cain tried this out of nowhere. By this time in Iowa, Herman Cain was already coming to Tea Party events for July 4th in 2010. He was one of the first candidates on the ground in Iowa. He couldn't pull it off. So he's got to get to work and make sure he's got competent people right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I've watched politics for too long, and I've been on the inside and the outside of politics, and I can see when someone is making a big splash that is just not going to resonate come election time, sadly. Another problem, another handicap that he has, if you will, with GOP is that he sort of undermined his own stance on the Second Amendment. To many constitutional conservatives, and people seem more anxious to call themselves constitutional conservatives than Republicans today, to many constitutional conservatives, this is a non-negotiable. You can't say the Second Amendment doesn't apply to people in the cities, but this is what he said. Is this recoverable ground for him, Steve?
Well, he's got a biography and a persona that means, I mean, listen, if you're an attractive male or an attractive female, if you're a talented male or a talented female, people give you more chances than people they don't find attractive or they don't find talented. Now, he's got both of those advantages. So he's going to get a lot of chances. But sooner or later, you have to close the sale with what you actually believe. So for him, it's recoverable. For someone else, it might not be. But for him, it is. But here's the warning I would give to Ben Carson. Since you don't have a record, your record is actually what you say and how you present yourself. You know, these guys go 12, 16-hour days, 12 days a week. You can't expect them to be right and to be on all the time. So if somebody like Rand Paul or Ted Cruz goes out there and flubs a Second Amendment question, you might overlook it because they have a record. But when someone doesn't have a record, what they say is their record. And that makes it even more important to know what you believe. I talk about that in the Washington Times article. Know exactly what you believe and game plan that out. You can't just play pretend candidate. Fred Thompson tried that. It worked for about 10 minutes.
Another thing that you are talking about is how important the moral foundation is. You say this will be the death of America. Discrimination against God-given rights. We have stories just today. A student suspended for saying "bless you" after a classmate sneezed. These stories are coming at us in spades right now, Steve. Is America savable?
Great question. Only by moral and spiritual revival, which is the only reason we had freedom and liberty on this continent in the first place. So if you don't have another great awakening that mirrors the great awakenings that gave birth to what we've been coasting off here for about the last century. If you don't have a repeat of those, Gina, then the answer is no. It is not salvageable, and we are doing all the same things that every other eventual footnote in history, all the same mistakes that they eventually made as well. And here's the reason why you're referencing the piece I wrote for the Blaze yesterday. This is why God-given rights are so key. This is the linchpin of the entire American experiment, because the founders called on the idea that their rights came from God and not government as the justification to be free men, that they were free men, but they still needed to be accountable to something, and it was God, and in whose image they were made and where their rights actually came from. If we remove the notion, if we remove the creed, Chesterton once said America was the only nation ever founded on a creed. If we remove the creed that our rights come from God, then we essentially become wards of the state.
Precisely what we're seeing. Steve Deace, thank you for being with us.